Hello and welcome to the Paul Green Comedy PaulCast for November 29th, 2024. This is episode 337. Oh my gosh, I am only 28 episodes away from accomplishing my goal of doing a daily podcast for a year. What am I going to do after that year, everybody? I don't know. I haven't thought about it. Am I going to stick with the daily? I don't know. It's a lot. I'll have to see. I'll have to see what I'm feeling. But we're getting there. We're getting there for this goal that I set out almost a year ago. Actually, this probably is the 1-year anniversary of the Paul Green Comedy Podcast when this gets released. I think my first episode was November 30th of 2023. So if I hadn't slacked off and started missing days, I would have hit my 365 episode mark. But I got a little behind, just a little behind, but not too bad. I'm back on track. I'm going to finish off these last episodes and then reanalyze my life, reanalyze my goals, and get a little more clear on what it is I want to do in the podcast space, in the putting my story out there space. But for now, you're still getting a daily check-in from stand-up comedian, actor, improviser, and dreamer, the one and only Paul Green Comedy. So I am back in Phoenix. I woke up this morning in New Mexico, in Mescalero, at the Inn of the Mountain Gods. And then I got some food. I hopped into my car, and then I pretty much drove 7 hours straight. I stopped once for gas. I never stopped to eat. And drove straight from southeast New Mexico right to Phoenix. But I didn't go home, and that is because I decided I needed to go see this Wicked musical that everybody is talking about and that people have been talking about for decades. Now, I am not a huge musical theater buff, although with as well as I know the musical Hamilton, I probably could have fooled some people. But I'm not like in the musical theater scene. There's still plenty of musicals I haven't seen that are very popular. Popular. See what I did there. Didn't even mean to. So for Wicked, I've never seen Wicked. I've never seen the musical. I've never seen like a bootleg copy of it. I've never listened to the soundtrack or any of the songs. I think I've heard some of the songs, which from the musical, but I think when I heard them, I didn't actually know that those were the songs from Wicked. I probably heard them when I was a fan of Glee. Did you guys watch Glee? I used to love that show. And I think they did Defying Gravity on there, and they might have even done Popular. Anyway, I recognize those songs, so I know that I had heard them before, but again, I don't really think it resonated me or that it occurred to me when I heard them that I was hearing songs from Wicked. Interestingly enough, the first time, well, I don't know if it's interesting or not, I'll let you decide that. The first time I had ever even heard of the musical Wicked was like when it first came out on Broadway. I think when was that? Like 2003, 2004. I was going to church, and one of the women in my congregation gave a talk in our congregation, and she referenced Wicked and discussed some of the themes of the musical and made religious parallels to those themes. And I just thought, oh, well, and she did a great job. She was very moved by the musical. And um, at the time, I just thought, oh, well, that's cool. But I'm not really into musical theater, so I don't think there's any chance I'm going to be seeing Wicked anytime soon. And and I remember when somebody told me a little bit about the plot, that it was like a prequel kind of to The Wizard of Oz. Then I was like doubly disinterested. I'm just going, okay. I've seen The Wizard of Oz. Great. I really don't have any interest in engaging in that story anymore. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I never was really cued in to anything going on with this musical for the last 20 years, however long it's been relevant. Because I know it's been a pretty big Broadway hit for about 2 decades. So I had no expectations going into this movie. I talked to several people. Some people just said, it was okay. I had some other people say like, oh yeah, it was, they did a good job or whatever. So I was just like, yeah, I'm going to go check this thing out. I can appreciate musicals. I did get way into Hamilton. I remember as a kid, um, we had a cassette tape of the original Phantom of the Opera Broadway cast. Um, you know, it was like their cast recording. And I remember listening to that cassette tape. So I actually knew Phantom of the Opera kind of top to bottom. I could sing all the songs as a kid, and I'd never seen the musical. I had just listened to that Broadway cast recording cassette. It was a cassette tape. Do you remember cassette tapes, everybody? That's going to age me a little bit. So I got to tell you, I freaking love the musical. Now again, I've only seen the movie. Well, that's not true. I watched the movie, and then after getting out of the movie, I was like, okay, I want to see how the movie compares to the musical. And so I found a bootleg of the musical, and Forgive Me World, that I watched the bootleg on YouTube. I don't know where or when the bootleg was filmed, but the production was really high quality. So it was either the Broadway production or it was, their touring company. I felt like the band wasn't super great. So that made me feel like maybe it was a touring company and they hired local musicians to play the book. Because I heard a couple of bad notes in the pit. I went, oh, that doesn't sound like professionally trained New York musicians. But yeah, I just loved the movie. I loved the whole idea. I'm like, oh, I totally get why this was such a huge sensation. I hate being like a bandwagon guy, especially. Well, I'm way too late. I mean, the bandwagon was 20 years ago. So, but you know what I mean? It's like when there's a really popular thing, I hate being the person who's like, oh yes, I'm also into that thing because, I don't want it to feel like I'm just following the crowd, that, I just like something because everybody else likes it. Um, but no, I really did. I really enjoyed it. I thought that Ariana Grande was so unbelievably funny in the movie. Her comedic timing and physicality and the nuance of so many comedic moments. I was cracking up at so much of what she was doing in that character. Um which quite frankly kind of pisses me off. It's like, really, you got to be that hot, that talented, that rich, that successful, and you're funnier than me? Okay, say some for the rest of us. But anyway, so that was the first thing that I really just loved is I just thought Ariana Grande was just so incredibly funny um, in her portrayal of the character, and really just loved this whole um, plot idea that who we thought was just a pure evil villain through and through from the original Wizard of the Oz. We get the backstory. We get to see the transformation. We get to see the nuance. Um, we get to see that there is a heck of a lot more to the story than what we initially saw and assumptions we made. So lots of powerful subplots and themes, and oh man, I'm trying to decide how much I want to go into my take on some of those themes because they're very powerful. What's interesting is this prequel. Totally gonna go off the rails here by bringing this up, but it reminded me of the Netflix series Cobra Kai. I don't know if any of you are into Cobra Kai, but Cobra Kai is a distant sequel to the Karate Kid movies. So if you were a fan of the original Karate Kid, which I think came out in the 80s, Daniel-san, Mr. Miyagi, the crane kick. So Cobra Kai fast forwards 20 years into the future when now Daniel-san and then Johnny Lawrence, who's the kid from Cobra Kai, who's kind of the punk kid who's bullying him, they have the big final match in the All Valley Karate tournament, and Daniel-san, kicks him in the face with the crane kick and wins the competition, right? So Cobra Kai takes place 20 years later, but it just flips everything on its head and does so masterfully, where you get Johnny Lawrence's side of the story in retrospect, as we're seeing him as an adult and how his life kind of didn't pan out very well. And then Daniel LaRusso is, just Mr. Big shot, and he owns a used car company, and he's successful, and he has the attractive wife and the kids. And then Johnny Lawrence is like an alcoholic and in and out of jobs and is a hothead and irresponsible and all of this stuff. It's so fascinating. But then you get to hear the whole story of the original Karate Kid through the viewpoint of Johnny Lawrence and why he was bullying Daniel-san, and the reason he even got in a fight with Danny on the beach when he was new in town, because Daniel-san was hitting on his, I'm saying Daniel-san, that's what Mr. Miyagi called him, because he was picking up on Johnny Lawrence's girlfriend, played by Elizabeth Shue, and it's like, oh yeah, he actually did do that, and how the crane kick was actually an illegal hit, but they still let him win. And so like all of these sort of fan fiction, Reddit threads that people have been complaining about, regarding the Karate Kid for years. It's like Cobra Kai came out and just said, hey, we're going to honor all of these complaints and tell this story from a different lens. And then we get to see Danny LaRusso and Johnny Lawrence as adults have to still grapple with this feud. Anyway, really fascinating. So that's what Wicked sort of gave me a bit of a reminder of, is this idea that whenever we're interacting with a story, that we really are only seeing the tip of the iceberg, or we're only seeing the part of the story or the narrative that somebody has chosen to present to us. So, here the Wizard of Oz, the original Wizard of Oz from 1939, is presenting the Wicked Witch of the West as just a pure evil villain. We don't know anything about this witch other than she's evil. She flies around in a broom, and, she's trying to kidnap Dorothy and her little dog too. And yet Wicked goes ahead and, takes an underwater camera, and we're only seeing the iceberg, and then it dives under the water and just shows that there's a whole other story behind the Wicked Witch of the West. And we learn. Oh, well, I don't want to do any spoilers, so I'll just say, in case you haven't seen it, go see it. And because there's so many themes in this movie that, again, I could really dive into and give my 2 cents on. But I think for now, I'm just going to focus on that general idea of, we are really choosing the narrative that we are going to focus on in our lives. Whatever we think our story is, and whatever we think somebody else's story is, that there is so many other ways to look at life and to approach a situation, and so much more under the surface. Matter of fact, I'm sorry, I don't know the music. I literally just watched it for the first time, and so I don't have it memorized by any stretch of the imagination. But I think there's actually a part where they say that sometimes you just have to look at a story a different way. I think it's the love interest of the Wicked Witch, and he's looking at her, and she's, kind of saying, "Hey, because I'm green, I'm not beautiful," and he just mentions something like, "Well, I'm just looking at you in a different way," or something like that. I'm so sorry if I'm messing that up again. I've never seen it until tonight, and so I'm by no means ready to start quoting it accurately, but that concept is differently there. And in this podcast, I talk so much about going for your dreams in life, and the stories that we tell ourselves and choose to believe and see, I think, is an incredibly crucial component to that pursuit, because there really is an unlimited amount of ways to look at a certain situation or to interpret a certain situation, all based on the stories that we choose to tell ourselves, and the part of the story that we choose to focus on and pay attention to, and by that same token, the part of the story that we choose to neglect and keep under the water, the part of the iceberg that's underneath the water that we aren't going to go, take a look at. And all of that is our choice. And yeah, I'll tell you, as I'm pursuing this dream, and have been pursuing this dream, and I look back at how many different narratives that I have been telling myself about myself, how many stories, and those stories are so powerful. The ability to tell story is what separates human beings from any other species. Is we can create a narrative and a story, and then that story gives meaning to our lives. Look at the big three religions. All of those religions exist because of religious stories that have been around for thousands and thousands of years. And those stories completely dominate the human experience. No matter what your religious, belief is, you're really believing in a story, in a narrative. And that's also true for each of us as individuals. There is a story that you are telling yourself, whether true or not. I can't even begin to unpack, are the stories true or not? My gosh, good luck trying to get to the bottom of that. But there is a story that we are telling ourselves, and that story is guiding our lives. based on the meaning we give to that story and the energy and power and passion to which we believe and engage in our own personal narrative. And for myself, the story I'm telling myself is that I'm a stand-up comedian who's pursuing comedy and, looking to, have some luck intervene, hopefully, in my positive favor to, get an opportunity, and that I need to do everything I can in my power to prepare for that lucky opportunity and do as much as I can to generate and create my own opportunities within whatever power or influence I have. But all of those decisions underneath it are all sitting on top of a story and a narrative. And it's a story and a narrative that I get to choose. And when something happens to me, if I have a good set or I have a bad set, or, I get passed over, I don't, get booked for a certain gig, or I don't get let into a certain comedy festival, or, whatever, when those things happen, I'm going to explain those events through the filter of the story and the narrative that I am telling myself. And that story probably isn't the whole story. There's many different ways that I could choose to go about that. But the one thing that I have really focused on over the last, 3 or 4 years, which has really shifted my mood, my attitude, my happiness, is I have really focused on changing my inner narrative, changing the story I'm telling about myself, telling myself that maybe I am capable of being successful. Maybe all of the failures that I had in the past were all just leading me to, to something bigger, to something greater. And telling myself the story that, hey, I didn't blow up in my 20s. I didn't get my big break as young as a lot of people get their big break. I didn't get my big break in my 30s. Well, now I'm in my 40s, and now I get to tell myself the story like, well, this is when it's going to happen. It's going to happen when it's supposed to for me. And all I need to do is keep honing my craft, keep growing, keep pursuing, keep focusing on anything that I can control, and trusting that when the timing is right, that luck will strike, and that I'll be able to have the experiences that I feel in my heart and that I'm seeking. And that maybe I too can defy gravity. Ah, damn it. I hate that I said that right then. Oh my gosh. It was too easy. It was too cheeky. I was being very sincere. And then I had to go and throw in a line from Wicked, but I still stand by what I said. All right, everybody. That is all for today. I hope you're all doing fantastic. Your dreams are coming true. You're out there pursuing them. And that if you are unhappy with a story in your life, my invitation is you can change that story. Or maybe there's more to the story. Maybe it's time to look deeper and see if maybe there isn't more to the story than maybe what you're giving yourself credit for, and seeing if that doesn't help give you a little encouragement and inspiration to keep trying and move forward and continue to pursue your dreams. All right, everybody. That is all for this episode of the Paul Green Comedy PaulCast. Thank you so much for listening. This is November 29th, 2024, episode 337. I hope this episode goes viral and I become popular. I did it again. All right. I love you all so much. We'll talk to you tomorrow.